Well, we now know that Attorney General William Barr will release the Mueller report, or some portion thereof, to both Congress and the public Thursday morning. Right now, attorneys from the Justice Department and Mueller's team are finishing the redactions. Barr, he's planning to color code those redactions into 4 categories. That means there's going to be a whole lot of blotted stuff. Grand jury details, classified information, info about ongoing investigations, and material affecting third parties. Now, the president, he's also continuing to slam the probe and also declare victory before the things even come out. These are tweets, again, just from today. He says again that Mueller's team has 8 angry Democrats and Trump haters. Again, not true. He calls the whole thing a hoax. Once again, he's saying no collusion, no obstruction. Of course, he's slamming Hillary because somehow, some way, she's a part of this. I can't make that part out. He also wants to investigate the investigators. So while the DOJ is working on the report, Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, remember him, he is preparing one of his own. Rudy's counter report is 140 pages long, and he's trying to whittle it down to 50 pages. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi, he joins us now. Oh, we've got an interesting week ahead of us here, Gene, and I guess I'm going to first start off by saying, with what you know, and there's a lot more that we don't know because we haven't seen the report, but from both Barr's statements, from some of the pushback by some of the prosecutors on Mueller that they didn't think his summary was reflective of their work product, to how he's already talked about spying and how he's already going to have a meeting with Nunes to talk about maybe prosecuting or investigating the investigators. At this point, do you trust that Barr is a fair broker?
Well, about 2 weeks ago, I would say yes to your question, Richard. But over the last couple of days, especially his testimony last week when he called certain activities spying, I would have said yes, that it would be fair. But his answer about the spying raised to me a concern that was very troubling. And by the way, I worked for 3 decades with the Department of Justice. Now I'm going to amend my resume to put that I was a spy for the Justice Department because I reviewed about 1,000 search warrants. But putting that aside, right now, I got to see what the report allows the public to see before I pass judgment of whether I have faith in him. And I always go back to December 24th, 1992, when he recommended 6 pardons in Iran-Contra. And now I'm thinking to myself, and I think the public should ask this, did Trump hire him because he had this affinity and affection for pardons? That's a question I'd like to be asked. But let me just say this about the report. It could be a nothing burger, it could be a whataburger, it could be a home run, it could be a strikeout. I predict it's probably going to be a stand-up double.
All right. Now, to that end, how should we look, Gene, at the redactions, and just how redacted a document do you think it's going to be?
Well, I want to be fair to the Attorney General and to Rod Rosenstein, and I worked with Rod for many years. It's okay to redact ongoing investigations. You have to. You can't show your cards to potential targets and subjects. I get that. And it's okay to redact, the means and methods of obtaining classified information. What I do object is this. If there's a gratuitous withholding of grand jury information that could be disclosed if they got a court order, I will be very upset, if you will, by over excluding grand jury information that probably should be in the hands of the public. But at a minimum, the entire report, unredacted, should go to the Intelligence Committee, and it should go to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. At a minimum, under a protective order arrangement where members of Congress can't go out and have a press conference in front of a camera. That should be a given.
You know, Eli Honig, former federal prosecutor who's been on the show quite a bit, he posited a theory which was, we could very well find out that when we read the more complete context, that Barr may have edited, in effect, what Mueller said, left off the although. He couldn't prove that there was collusion, there was a second part to it, for example. If there's any of that, Gene, then I think to the first question I asked you, whether you can trust him, I think there's going to be legitimate folks on the Hill particularly are going to say, wait a minute, you're not a ref here. You're either wearing shirts or skins. You're picking a side, and you're kind of coloring this report to suit that side.
Absolutely, and I know Ellie, he's a good person. He's brilliant. He was from the Southern District. I was from the Eastern District, so I'm not going to hold that from him. I was in Virginia. But I agree with him. If there is any indication that the Attorney General or anybody else edited unjustifiably and put their figurative thumb on the scale, that is like an umpire, going back to baseball, it's like an umpire in a baseball game. Before it starts, he's out gallivanting around with one of the teams that's going to play on the field. You can't do that. You can't do that. So I agree with him.
Gene, Don McGahn is a name that many of us heard about, let's say, midway through the probe. Turns out he spent quite a few hours with Mueller and team. Now, all of a sudden, his name's getting resurrected. He could be a big player in all this, couldn't he?
Yes, because they interviewed him, Richard, for 30 hours. And as a former prosecutor, interviewed a lot of witnesses. 3 hours is a lot. 6 hours is a lot. When you interview somebody for 30 hours, that means there was a lot of material that they had to cover, and there probably were a lot of leads that he provided. So I got to tell you this, McGahn's information, if it's overly redacted in that report, that's going to be a huge red flag and loud gong for people like me and Ellie who think that Attorney General Barr has the capacity to put his thumb on the scale. It may not happen. He may be fair and balanced, if you will. But if there's any indication that he unjustifiably edited and redacted that report in order to protect the president, his job is not to protect the president. His job is to protect the rule of law and Lady Justice. Those are two different roles.
Now, this one might just be because it's their DNA, Gene, but to me, if the report came out and I was Trump, let alone Trump's legal team, after, wiping my brow and doing a giant woo, I would basically not say the word Mueller. I wouldn't say anything about probe. I just thank my lucky stars and hope the report that comes out isn't bad. But they've done everything in their power in this past week to try and, negate the report, go after the members of the prosecutorial team here. They're now talking about investigating the investigators. They're saying it doesn't matter what's in the report when it comes out. They're doing the opposite of quitting while they're ahead. Is that just because that's who they are? Or you think they're really nervous what could be in this thing?
I don't know if that's who they are, but that shows nervousness. When I prosecuted organized crime people, very violent people, their MO was twofold. One, investigate the people who are prosecuting me, and two, come up with a counter version to what the prosecutors are saying. And they are exhibiting the same qualities that I experienced as a prosecutor for many years, that they're spending all this time to write a 140-page rebuttal. If that belies their celebration a couple weeks ago that the report totally exonerated them. Why would you need to write 140 pages when the report allegedly exonerated you? And investigating the investigators, that dog's not going to hunt. There's no way in heck that the Department of Justice and the FBI are so corrupted, so poisoned with bias and prejudice, that they're just going to concoct this report to take down the President of the United States. It's actually sad and pitiful.
Well, on Thursday, we're going to get this report. How much of it, the jury's still out. But Gene Rossi says stand up double. And that would be significant in its own right. Gene, we're going to find out soon enough, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it after the fact. I always appreciate you giving me a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, everybody, a lightning round of several stories, including Pelosi on 60 Minutes last night, taking on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the president's hypocrisy about 9/11, and the latest Democrat to now join the crowded field of presidential candidates.